Hello and welcome to Security Scan. I am Vishal Dahiya, and this week we will look at the indigenously developed light combat aircraft Tejas. 2 years after being inducted in the Indian Air Force, indigenous fighter aircraft Tejas formally commenced operation this week from Sulur Air Force Station near Coimbatore. The journey from conceptualizing to getting into air, this indigenous fighter jet has taken more than 3 decades. Tejas is the first advanced fly-by-wire fighter aircraft designed, developed and manufactured in India by Hindustan Aeronautics Limited. The Southern Air Command base of Indian Air Force as of now has 9 Tejas jets as part of its 45th Squadron, the Flying Daggers. The IAF has been facing a severe shortage of fighter aircraft with its current strength coming down to 32 squadrons against a sanctions number of 42. With a high number of combat aircrafts, including the MiG-21s and MiG-27s, due to be retired in near future, the number of squadrons is further expected to shrink up to 22 in the next 15 years if the shortfall is not met at the same rate. The indigenous fighter aircraft Tejas is expected to contribute to the IAF's kitty and boost the efforts to make up for this shortfall. While first 40 Tejas Mark 1 jets are expected to be delivered by 2023, IAF has placed an order of 83 Tejas Mark 1A, which will be an improved version. However, the high price quoted by HAL for this improved version has raised eyebrows in the government. So what makes the LCA Tejas lightest multi-role supersonic aircraft of its class, and will it be able to meet the needs of Indian Air Force both in terms of augmenting its strength and capabilities? For more on this, today we have in the studio a distinguished panel of guests. Let me start by introducing them to you, beginning with the retired Air Vice Marshal Manmohan Bahadur, who is the additional DG of Center for Air Power Studies. We also have with us Mr. Alok Bansal, the Director, India Foundation, and we have with us Mr. Ajay Banerjee, Defence Correspondent from the Tribune, a veteran in covering the defence news. Welcome all of you to Rajya Sabha TV studios. Let me begin with you, Air Marshal Bahadur, and trying to understand this entire, concept of LCA Tejas and the place where it has reached now.
As the name suggests, it comes into the light category, the light combat aircraft. It's been decades in the coming. Even these 9 aircraft, which is just actually half a squadron. And to put it in perspective, 2 aircraft were the initial ones, and in the last approximately 3 years, the HAL has produced only 7 aircraft. So the rate of production is extremely low. So when you said that we'll expect to get 40 aircraft by 2023, I really have my doubts for 2 reasons. One, that the production line is not able to keep up. They're supposed to reach 8 aircraft per year. They're supposed to start a second line possibly, but that's all still being in the planning stage. And the other thing is that the Tejas Mark 1A, remember that 40 aircraft is 20 in the initial op configuration, and the final op configuration is going to be 20. That aircraft, the prototype, with all the 4 additional things that the Air Force has asked for and HAL has promised, is yet to fly. So to get the remaining 30 aircraft in the next 5 years, to me is a little doubtful, especially since the prototype is yet to fly. Now, Tejas has got a big place as far as numbers and in the low capability is concerned in the Air Force scheme of things. Actually, the Air Force wants, as you rightly put it, it's 40 plus 83 more of Mark 1A. Now that Mark 1A is yet to come, and that's where those 4 additional things have to come in. The other issue is that beyond that, if HAL is able to keep up, there is the talk of Mark 2 also, but that's still some distance away. If HAL can, if I can use the pun, pull up its socks in a way and get the aircraft going, the Mark 2, then the Air Force actually wants to buy 300 aircraft, provided they come in time, provided before that the prototype flies well, and everything goes as per plan. In the bigger scheme of things, actually it's 18 squadrons, 18, which is a big number. So the Air Force and the country looks up to the defense, DRDO, the ADA rather, and the HAL to do the supplies, to do the manufacturing in time, so that the air defense stays where it's supposed to be.
Okay, we'll come to the issues with regard to the production as well. But let me bring in Captain Bansal here on the issue of where does Tejas fits in the scheme of things of IAF, as Vice Marshal was also pointing out that it does play a very important role. But in terms of capabilities and in terms of numbers, both, how crucial is it?
See, it is intended to make Tejas the workhorse of the Air Force, like MiG-21 was there in the past. The bulk of the squadrons comprised of MiG-21 different variants and something. And that is what I think they intend doing Tejas, because it's low cost, indigenous production line would have done that. The bigger problem has been that while the aircraft undoubtedly is, I think, the lightest aircraft in its category, it's got, in its category, amongst the light aircraft, it's, I think, got phenomenal capacities, though there are, of course, different versions. People say there are certain shortfalls, which Air Force has already pointed out, which are to be made up. But one must understand that whenever any indigenous production comes up, it always will have certain shortfalls. When we are buying something, we are already going for something which is already available. When it is being developed, there are shortfalls which can be made up. Now, if you have to sustain that defense DRDO, if you have to actually encourage innovation, if you have to encourage indigenization, you have to accept the aircraft initially with certain shortfalls and then keep improving upon it. The second factor is production. I think the rate of production, HAL is neither geared to mass produce this sort of aircraft. HAL should actually be a developing agency. The production, to my mind, has to be offloaded to a private sector player. Now, there are a large number of private sector players coming into the defense industry. I think it would be ideal for HAL to tie up with them and give them the prototype, because then they would be able to streamline that level of production. Ideally speaking, we need to have multiple production lines for this sort of an order. The type of order which AVM Bahadur has talked of actually will require multiple production lines. And then only we will be able to make ourselves self-sufficient, because we have such a huge shortfall at this point of time. Unless, of course, we can jack up our production rate, we will not be able to meet that. But having an indigenous fighter, and that too of this advanced caliber, as the main backstay of your Air Force will be a very, very big achievement, and certainly a commendable feature.
Okay, but since both of you have pointed to the missed delivery targets and all, let me bring in Mr. Banerjee on this. And since Mr. Banerjee has filed a couple of reports as well, one specifically on how HAL has sped up its production facility to try and meet the delivery targets. Is it possible, Mr. Banerjee, for HAL to meet that target, which Vice Marshal is also pointing out, as well as Captain Bansal?
There are two issues. First, the HAL, for the past 4 years, we are hearing that they are coming up with a plan to have increase the production line. Now, to my mind, 4 years is a long time to set up a production line, but we are told the production line will be ready end of this year or probably early next year. That will be 5 years in the making to set up a production line. Internationally, it takes around 3 years to set up a production line. Agreed, we are not at those levels, but I think that production line has to be speeded up. That will increase the production to 16 planes a year. That may not be enough. We need at least 30 for the next 10 years. Each year, if we really have to make a difference in the world and stop imports. Now, second part HAL has done is they have recently floated a tender, given out tenders to make 8 planes. They are becoming an integrator like an international organization, and they have asked private companies to make certain parts, wings, the tail wings, other things. They've asked them to make it, and they will integrate it. They are for 8 planes only. If the experiment succeeds, they'll take it further. That's what we are told by the HAL. However, I'll repeat myself. We need to have an international level of production line, 30 planes per year for the next 10 years to make it work.
Okay, so from 9 planes in 3 years to 16 annually, that would be quite an improvement. But if you look at the other aspect of it, the technical aspect of it, the difference between Mark 1, Mark 1A, Mark 2. For the layman to understand, how would this difference be significant as far as Air Force is concerned?
A big difference between the Mark 1 and Mark 1A. There are 4 additional things which are required for any modern fighter. Remember, we are talking of an aircraft which will be with us for the next 40 years at least. So, a beyond visual range missile, air-to-air refueling, active electronically scanned radar, that is the ISR radar, and modern electronic warfare suite to safeguard it in battle space.
Okay.
So these are the 4 additional things that have to fly in the Mark 1A prototype together. Individually, 1 or 2 have flown, but together integrated, that Mark 1A is yet to fly.
Okay.
Mark 2 is actually a very different aircraft because it will get a new engine. Presently, it's the GE 404, and that one will have 414, which is got greater power, and hence the size is bigger. The moment the size changes, the fuselage design, the fuselage has to accommodate that. That changes. Thrust more means you have to strengthen parts. The moment you strengthen parts, the aircraft becomes heavier. So as it is, Tejas has had a problem of heavier weight. So now with all these things adding up, Tejas Mark II would be actually a new aircraft in a way. They say the prototype will fly in the next 5 to 8 years. I hope it flies, because thereafter you have to set the production line going. So these are they are different classes. And remember, the Mark II, if it comes and is successful, it is supposed to be a replacement for the Mirage 2000, the MiG-29 and the Jaguar. So it is supposed to have that sort of a capability. So it will form the lower spectrum of the throw weight which the Air Force can sort of throw at the adversary. Then you have the MMRC, the Rafale, which will be there in the medium class, and of course the Sukhoi.
Okay.
But there was a point that was raised regarding the cost. It is not low cost. It is not. It costs 463 crores each. The first LCA was 363 crores, 100 crores more. The Sukhoi is 319 crores. And Sukhoi is 415 crores from HAL. If you buy it from Russia, it is 330 crores. A Dornier is cheaper if you buy it from Germany than you buy it from HAL. But yes, we have to develop our own agency. We must. So if we have to pay a little more, but that little has to be quantified. Okay. And that's why that committee which has been formed. And if I may add just one more thing, it is the extra workforce with the HAL, the overheads with the HAL. When the MMRCA was being talked of, and when the Rafale had been sort of shortlisted in that MMRCA project, 1 unit of work done by a European company, here you required 2.7 people to work. So it was 2.7 times less efficient HAL is. We have to do something with the costs.
So to try and push the HAL as well. But on the cost part, and it's good that you brought it up, because that would have been my next one to Captain Bansal. Why is it that costlier, as Vice Marshal is pointing out? And this is raised eyebrows in the government as well. There have been a committee which has been set up. How can we bring it down if you look at the cost factor?
I think we need to make HAL a more efficient organization. In fact, public sector units do not have a very good track record of efficiency. And I think if you remember, when Rafale had been finalized and the government of that time wanted Rafale to go in for a collaboration with HAL, Rafale eventually actually backed out because collaborating with HAL and then sticking to timelines was just impossible, because as AVM Bahadur said, it is so inefficient that it takes 2.7 times more manpower to do the same job, which Rafale in Europe they were doing. So with that sort of an inefficiency, the costs will obviously go up. And if we look at it, the way it's been going on, it's been actually functioning more like a government organization rather than a commercial entity. And unless, of course, you start competing, because till now HAL has been operating as a monolith. It had a monopoly in those products that it was producing, and there was no competition. And that's where I feel that once a prototype has been developed by the DRDO, the production should be handed over to private sector, and at least more than one person, so that there is some sort of a competition. We should have go in for a commercial bidding and ask somebody who can bring down the price and speed up the production line, because private sector by nature, whatever may be the drawbacks, but they are far more dynamic, because the decision making is far faster.
Okay, Mr. Banerjee, you pointed out that the private players have been involved by the HAL. So going by that yardstick, and the call for making it more productive and more efficient as far as HAL is concerned, will it be possible for the HAL to bring down the cost to that extent where it is acceptable to the IAF in terms of the new prototype?
See, there are two questions in your question. Firstly, I'll address the larger picture. HAL, as both the panelists have pointed out, that HAL has to change. And the change is now HAL and all other defense public sector undertakings are caught in a 1960s kind of economy where they were more like employment generators. Boss, we are no more employment generators. We want those planes, we want those missiles quickly. So things have to change there. You cannot say कि आज सरकार ने, pardon me, the government has increased the DA, so we are also increasing the DA. There has to be economies of scale. There has to be systems which run on time and which bring you value for money.
So the focus has to be on meeting the targets.
Meeting the targets, not on employment generation. They have to change, and somebody has to change that. On the part you say that private players have been involved, I would back Mr. Bansal's opinion that we need to have a private player making these planes because HAL is going slow. Not that HAL is bad. They're doing a good job. Let us accept Tejas as a building block. We made the first block, the second block, the third block, fourth block. But we need speed. Whereas the private sector is involved, I will bring it to a notice, and the viewers must know this. A leading private sector company made the hull of the nuclear submarine. So the private sector has the technology, has the money, and has the capacity to do it. Let us involve them. I would back that suggestion.
Okay, Vice Marshal, coming back to the IAF vis-a-vis, how it sees Tejas, where does it fit in the IAF's fighter fleet? Will most of the fleet be consisting of the Tejas Mark 1A or Mark 2 in, say, almost a decade or 15 years?
Yeah, as I said, the plan of the Air Force is actually to get 18 squadrons of Mark 2, Tejas Mark 2, if they come on time. Because just remember that as far as the warfighter is concerned, he requires a weapon in his hand or to fly in the case of the Air Force. If that doesn't come from indigenous sources, it has to come from somewhere. It will have to come from abroad in that case. So the plans are big. The plans are to go the indigenous way. The plan is to make sure that we have the Sukhois for long term, we have certain number of Rafales, and the bulk of the low, middle and low weight category, you require those numbers. You require numbers. Those being made up by the Tejas. So many a times people say that you have got Sukhois which is a multi-role, Rafale which is multi-role. So why do you require so many? Is there a requirement of your 39 squadrons or 42 squadrons for a two front? The point is numbers count. Numbers are there, are certainly required because you can't be shuffling your assets. Coming back to the Tejas, yes, we wish that Addl, which I suppose will make the Tejas Mark II, the prototype. Parallelly, we have not done the manufacturing process while the development is on, and that has been our problem. So when a prototype reaches a certain stage, the drawings need to get transferred to the production agency so that jigs, so that land is acquired, hangars are made, jigs are acquired, and gradually the production technology information gets shifted to the manufacturing. That's the only way you can keep up. You cannot wait like the Tejas that let's see if it flies. You convert a technology demonstrator, which the LCA was, into say, okay, we will take this, and now you start thinking of productionizing. We will always be behind the clock.
So it has to be a seamless operation.
It has to be a seamless, continuous, and somebody should have the big picture. Somebody has to be driving the R&D, which is Addl, and in this case presently HAL, or if a private player comes up, which I agree should come up, we require. Okay. So somebody should have an overall picture, and it should not be that my time is up and I leave at 5 o'clock or give me overtime. That way industry doesn't work.
Okay. Captain Bansal, one very interesting question, and which comes from Vice Marshal's comments only, that given the fact that Indian Air Force's numbers in terms of its fighter jets are dwindling fast and might come to a situation where the number of squadrons will also be very less, what is more important, the number or the technology?
See, both are important. You cannot do away with that because numbers are required. You've got a huge area which has to be defended, and you need aircraft at different places. For air defense requirement, you need aircraft to be dispersed. You can't have a limited number of multi-role aircraft located at one location and expect them to provide air defense across length and breadth of India. That's just not feasible. So both technology and numbers are important. As AVM Bahadur said, that we are looking for certain number of high-end aircraft to provide that edge. But the bulk, the mainstay of the Air Force is expected to be Tejas, and that is where we are looking at it. To my mind, one big flaw in this whole system has been that Air Force has really not gone in for an in-house design facility. Now, that has actually been a success as far as Navy is concerned. Naval ships are designed in-house by the Navy and then given to the shipyards. If Air Force would have had an in-house design facility, then the changes, because what happens is invariably you are doing a tail chase. You give a staff requirements, DRDO designs, by the time DRDO designs, the staff requirements change. And you are into a perpetual tail chase. Now, if you have an in-house design facility, the inputs keep coming continuously. It's a dynamically coming, and that's how you can keep changing that. Now, that could have been one way of actually designing something which can come in. And then, of course, once the design comes, I personally feel HAL should not have the sole monopoly of producing them or manufacturing them. It should be an open tender. Let any agency come up and produce them. Once a prototype has been designed, DRDO or Air Force or whoever has designed it, you have the designs, you give it to the private sector, let them produce it.
Okay, Mr. Banerjee, there's been a lot of talk about the ideal situation of being prepared for a 2.5 front. In that situation, and specifically looking at the current position where the IAF is in terms of its numbers and the way the LCA Tejas project is moving ahead, what is, again, the same question, what is more important according to you? Is it the numbers? Should the focus be on acquiring more numbers by having Tejas as well as, going in for other MMRCAs, be it Rafale or be it some other fighter jet, or focusing on developing more indigenous technology and ensuring that we are independent?
See, a lot of talk goes on that what is the number required. I'll only give one line answer. Both your adversaries, although the northern part and the western part, are adding numbers. And in huge numbers. They are not going slow, they are going very fast. It's very rapid induction on both the sides. So the numbers means they are adding numbers, you have to have numbers, boss. That is a simple mathematics. There doesn't need any great thought process. Second part, I must add that it will be pretty scandalous to say it on a governmental channel, that we have a lot of surplus land with the DPSUs, Defense Public Sector Undertakings. As Bansal Sahab has pointed out, I would take it one step further. Get a good private company, give them land, allocate them land in the defense public sector undertaking, let them make the jet there. Unless they find the land, they make it. Let us not be afraid of the private sector. They buy the land, they take the land, there will be 1,000 issues with that, environmental issues, other issues. Give them the existing land. Let them make it. When the project is over, take back the land. What is the big deal? They're making it for the country only. The designs are yours, you have the command and control of the center, you deploy a team to control it, have the private sector make it. Use the labor, use them, and pay them money to make it. Take back the land when the project is over.
So more involvement of private sector. That's what you're saying.
Take back the land, even go one step ahead, give them land, take back the land when the project is over. It is your land.
Okay, Vice Master Bahadur, do you agree with these two suggestions? One is involve private players more, and second, as Captain Mansal was pointing out, in-house design facility is something which could have pushed the things more.
We are now beyond that. The point is that the country at some point of time thought that there should be an independent agency to design, because the basic aim of the armed forces is to fight, is to defend and fight. So at that point of time, 30 years back, they said that there should be a design agency separate to take on this project like the Tejas, and that's why ADA was made. ADA was carved out. We still had the DRDO. We still had the Aircraft Design Bureau of HAL. Just like you have a rotary wing design bureau of the HAL, where the LCH was designed and where the ALH was designed. So the point is that we are beyond that now.
Okay.
The present situation is we have invested so much of money and so much of infrastructure into our ADA that ADA had better deliver now. And that's where, and we cannot start now, we'll be looking at a new design 15, 20 years from now. We don't have the time. So it is ADA which has to deliver the design, and that's where it is, hopefully it will deliver as far as the Advanced Medium Combat Aircraft, the AMCA is concerned, because the next step is Tejas, basically is Tejas, hopefully AMCA, Rafale and Sukhoi, and that would be the sort of force mix for the long term, actually for the medium term in a way, and AMCA is also there. But the point is, the proof of the pudding of AMCA is actually in Tejas Mark II.
Tejas Mark II.
That has to come. And if I may add, proof of the pudding of Mark II is Mark 1A and the production numbers. If we fall short, then I'm afraid the government will have no other choice but to continue with the RFI, which has been floated for about 120 aircraft.
That's quite a lineup which you gave. Let me take concluding comments from Captain Bansal. Is that really possible, which Vice Marshal is pointing out, and how much more effort and where the concern areas would be to try and take care of all these
See, what he said, I tend to agree that there are different agencies set up for design, but I think even now you could do it. ADA could be brought under the Air Force. See, when the user has a stake in the designing, the design is likely to be more acceptable to the user. When user sees designer as somebody who's an alien entity or who's the other side of the fence, you are bound to point out far more flaws than it would be, and your inputs would come only at a final stage rather than at perpetual at all stages. So you probably could do it, and maybe slowly these could be incorporated. The drastic change at this stage is not feasible, but if you have to fight, you should be able to design a platform which is capable of fighting, and that integration has to be there because we are dependent on imports. And we have a successful model. Navy has to a very great extent indigenized, and that indigenization has happened because they have created a certain amount of research and development facility within the naval headquarters. They've also got almost the complete design facility inside the naval headquarters.
Okay. So, Mr. Banerjee, final comments from you on how do you look at Tejas' future?
I would only request one thing. Somebody, the government has to take a call, ramp up production facility. The production facility is very low, very slow at the moment. Ramp it up, bring in private sector, and speed up the design part. These planes, what AVM Bahadur has pointed out, the Tejas Mark 1 and the Mark 2, we have been hearing them as reporters for the past 4 or 5 years. Look at the international companies. They are producing the next generation in every 5 years, 6 years. They bring out an upgrade. What about us? Tejas Mark 1A is in the works for the past 5 years. The first prototype, as AVM Bahadur Sahab has pointed out, has not flown. It should have been flown long back. We already have the building block. We have to increase it. Please speed up. That's the only thing.
Okay. So clearly, as has been pointed out by our panelists, that Tejas is definitely a remarkable achievement, but we will have to go ahead and ramp up the production facilities to try and meet the targets of the Indian Air Force and meet their requirements. We'll come back next week with a different topic and different set of guests. Till then, keep watching Rajya Sabha Television.